Sean said, I thank you all for coming out and honoring Mary today with us. This church is aptly named. It's named Two Rivers. And I'll tell you, I'm going to cry two rivers today. So just excuse me and let me get through this, because I grew up a tough kid. I fought a lot of kids when I was young. I was a tough guy. I didn't cry. But when it comes to my wife, this is tough. This is really tough. You see, she was my sports car. I polished her. I took her out on Sundays. I was proud of her. I would do anything for her. She was garaged. I was the pickup truck. If I got my windshield broken, I didn't care. If you dinged my truck, I didn't care. That's what it was. I was the heavy lifter. I was the one that was supposed to do all the heavy lifting, and I was the one that was going to have everything happen to him, but nobody was going to mess with my sports car, because my sports car was what I valued. My sports car is what God gave to me. And that's why I had such a hard time when she came down with cancer. Because I said, as for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord, and I'm the strong man. And if anyone comes into my house, they got to fight me. They got to come through me first. And that's why I had such a hard time with this cancer, because it should have hit me. I could have dealt with that. I wouldn't have had any issue with that whatsoever. But when it hit my wife, that wasn't fair. That wasn't fair. And we drew lines in the sand and said, she's going to get healed. She's not going to leave this way. And we prayed. And we fought. And we went all over the place. And it didn't end the way we thought. So here I am. I'm going to tell you my story. And it's a good story. I grew up in upstate New York. I came out to Arizona State University to go to college. I got hired, and I actually found the Lord. I was born and raised a Catholic, but I found the Lord when I was a senior in college. And a good friend of mine who's here today was the one that led me to the Lord, Chuck Stewart, and I love the man dearly. But he didn't know at the time, nor did I. But me coming to the Lord prepared me for what was going to happen later on. And it was a great thing. Because I graduated from ASU and I got hired right off campus by Del Monte Foods. And they moved me to West Texas. In West Texas, I was there for 10 months, and then I got promoted down to South Texas. And my next oldest brother, Jay, was living in Brownsville, and I was living in Mission, Texas, about 90 miles apart. So the first 6 weeks I was down there, I would travel on Friday nights, 90 miles, and I'd spend the weekend with my brother, his wife, and their little daughter. And I did that for 6 weeks. And on Wednesday of the 7th week, I was driving from store to store, being a Del Monte representative. And all of a sudden, I heard the audible voice of God. And the audible voice of God came out of my back seat, and this is what it said to me. You're going to find a home church this weekend. And I pulled over and I looked and I went, what was that? I had never heard the audible voice of God. It wasn't in my head. It was in my back seat. And if I would have recorded it, and if the Lord would have allowed that, I could play back right now the audible voice of God. But being a fairly new Christian, I knew I had to obey that. So my brother called me the next night on Thursday. Thank you. And he said to me, when are you coming out? And I said, I'm not. And he said, why not? I said, because God told me I had to find a home church. So he goes, open your yellow pages. I know some churches on your side of the valley. So I did. And I was reading them off, and he said, that Assembly of God church, Brother Bowen's church, that's a good one. Circle that. I circled it in the yellow pages. A lot of people don't understand. Kids here, yellow pages used to be advertisements. Bring you up to speed on what that's all about. So I went further down, and I came across another church, and it was called Church of the Good Shepherd. Pastor Bowen, Pastor Haspany. And he says, oh, that's a good one too. I'd circle that one. So I did. So being the logical guy that I was going to go to the church that was closest to me, which happened to be the Assembly of God church. Brother Bowen's church was about 1.5 miles down the road. The other one was across town. But his service started at 9:45, and the other one started at 10:15. So I went to bed that night knowing I was going to go to that Assembly of God church because I was going to honor what God had asked me to do. But little did I know that something happened to me that morning that never happened to me before. I overslept. And I overslept big time. I woke up at 9:45, jumped into the shower, got out of the shower, got dressed, jumped into the car, and now it was about 10 minutes after, 5 minutes after 10. There was no way I could go to that 9:45 service. So I had to book all the way across town to go to the other church. And when I got there, I was late there as well. So I walked in, and it was a big church. And the usher looked at me, he says, you, sit here. Okay. I sat there. 2 minutes later, they sat someone next to me. And I'll tell you what, that's how I met my wife. The Lord made me oversleep. The Lord orchestrated it, talked to me verbally. And that's how I met my wife. You talk about a divine appointment. Well, everyone always thinks that's how it ended. We got married the next day. No. It didn't happen that way. But there's a lot to this story. A lot that happened before I graduated from college. A lot that happened before I met my wife. Seems that she was at a missionary trip on South Padre Island, and she was going to this church that was having a revival meeting. And the pastor had a visiting preacher come in, and he was talking about various things and putting out your faith and wanting things in your life. And if that's the case, step forward and get it. Well, Mary went to this session, and she saw this young pastor talking, and she saw his wife and his family, and she thought, wow, I'd love to have somebody like that. I'd love to have a marriage like that. And lo and behold, she gave everything she had in her bank account because she wanted a husband. And she said, I want a husband just like that guy. And she gave everything she had. I think it was like $305. Whatever it was, she wrote the check for everything she had. So now I'm going to jump down the story quite a bit. So here I meet her, and she asked me, because she was the head of the college and career group, she says, Paul, or she said to the group, she said, hey, there's a new guy I just saw in the back, because she only sat with me for about 5 minutes, and then people called her up, and she sat with people that she knew further up. And she said, there's a new guy in the back of the church, why don't we ask him to go to lunch with us? She said, you know, and so they did, and about 25 of us went out to lunch. And I was fortunate because she was sitting right across the table from me. So I was talking to her, and I said to her, do you want to see my kids? And she didn't know who I was. She said, yeah, sure, let's see your kids. So I reach over and I give her my wallet. Back then, we used to have pictures in wallets, kids. You probably don't know that today. And I showed her the pictures of my 2 nieces and my nephew that I called my children, my kids. And I said, I love them. These kids are awesome. And she went, wow, that's really nice. But then she flipped through the rest of the wallet. And she saw some pictures of girls that I had dated in the past, and many of them were blonde hair, blue-eyed. So her perception was that's what I wanted. So she didn't think much about us ever dating or anything. So she now goes to Canada for 4 months, and she comes back and she's engaged. And she brings a girl back with her called Marlene, who was blonde, that she was going to fix me up with. So I'm hanging out with Marlene and I'm hanging out with Mary. And I'm having a great time with both of them. And Mary would all of a sudden leave us alone in different situations. And I go, what's going on here? And so anyhow, I jumped companies from M&M Mars, from Del Monte. I moved to M&M Mars, the candy company, and I had 2 weeks off, and it was around Thanksgiving. So I said, I'm going to go back to New York State and celebrate Thanksgiving with my family, so I did. And I went to see a buddy of mine, and his mother was very close to me, and I was close to her because I was her paper boy for 5 years. And she was talking to me, and she said, Paul, are you seeing anybody? And I said, actually, I'm seeing 2 girls right now. And she looked at me and she said, no. You can't see 2 girls, there's only one that you really like. And that focused me. And all of a sudden I said, wow, I'm in love with Mary. I am in love with Mary. So I went back knowing that I love this woman. And I started to hang out with her more and more. And every time I hung out with her, I loved her more and more. Because in the past, when I'd be dating somebody, a lot of times I'd come home exhausted. Exhausted. It's like, whoa, did I have to work a lot on this date? This is terrible. I'd never call him back. You know? It was a one and done. Didn't want to see it. But with Mary, it was different. She was a giver, and so was I. And because she was a giver, I could give to her. And because I was a giver, she could give back. And I learned something there. I learned a lot about relationship. And I want to talk to the guys right now. Because the Bible says, as you sow, so shall you reap. I learned if you sow positives into your wife or into your loved ones, that's what you get back. But if you sow negative into them, that's what you get back. And it was so easy to pour love into Mary. It was so easy. And when I did, it came back to me, pressed down, shaken together, overflowing. Because that's what women are, they're birthers. Men aren't, we couldn't handle that. But women are, they're birthers. So men, be very careful what you put into your wives. Because what you put in, you're going to get back. If you want love, you better be the one that's putting it in there. And if you don't, shame on you. If you put despair in your wife, you're going to have despair come back. If you put resentment in, that's what you're going to harvest. So be very careful what you put into your spouse. And love her dearly. Love her dearly. So anyhow, we're getting ready to get married because all of a sudden I knocked on her door one time at 7 o'clock in the morning. And I'd been up all night praying. And Mary is a very powerful woman. Very powerful woman. So I'm knocking on her door at 7 o'clock in the morning. She opens it. She had just come out of the shower probably 20 minutes before that. And she sees me. I said, I need to talk. She says to me, so do I. I need to tell you something. Well, I walk in, and she goes, let me, and I said, shh. And she went, what was that? I said, sit down. And she sat down. And I went through, at that point, 5 points that the Lord had showed me that night. 5 points that I had to pray about and was up all night with the Lord. Those 5 points, He had showed her in the shower 20 minutes before. Every one of them.
So when I labeled them off and I went down the list, one after another, after another, after another, after another, at the end I said, "And I want you to marry me." And she looked at me in total astonishment and said, "Yes." Yes. Because we were reading each other's mail, and the mail was coming from God. And it was a great thing. And it was meant to be. So we started to get ready for the wedding plans. And it just so happened that my family hadn't met Mary yet. So I introduced him to my brother in Brownsville and his wife and the daughter and everything else. And to my strange surprise, they looked at each other and they said, "Yeah, hi Mary. Oh, hi Jay." And they're hugging each other. And I'm sitting there going, "Wait a minute. This is my brother. It's not your brother. How do you know each other?" "Oh, I know him because he was preaching on South Padre Island. And it was his wife and daughter that I saw. And I gave everything I had for that offering. And I said, I want someone just like him. I want someone just like him. Does he have a brother?" I was in West Texas then. I was in West Texas. God promoted me down to South Texas. I was being directed by God without my knowledge. But I was bought with a price. $340 is what I was worth. But I tell you this story because it was divine what happened in my situation. I would have nearly had to have been deaf, dumb, and blind not to know that God had this woman for me. And I'll tell you what, she gave me back the ring 2 or 3 times before we got married. And that was okay. And she ripped my heart a few different times. And that was okay, because I'm a pickup truck. See, I can handle that. Nobody hurts my wife. Nobody hurts my sports car. But I'm a pickup truck. And guys, you better be pickup trucks. Don't be babies. Don't be babies. Be the man of your house. Be a pickup truck. If somebody dents you, who the heck cares? But you better watch after your wife and children. That's what matters. That's what you're directed to do. And that's why this cancer situation was so hard for me. Because I fought with God for the first month and a half, 2 months. I said, "God, it should have been me. I'm the strong man of the house. It should have come through me. I can handle that. I can't handle my sports car getting damaged at all." But we held out that she was going to get healed. And if certain situations hadn't occurred, she would have. She would have. But God had other plans. Mary was more than a wife. She was my hero. And you say, how did that happen? Well, I saw her go through some amazing things. When, she didn't know this, but when I first found out as a kid, twins, I never heard about twins until I was about 8 or 9, and I'm like, wow, I wish I'd been a twin. That'd be fun to have someone of my own age to play with. Well, I was a little too old for that to happen by then. But God blessed me with having twins first time out, because I wanted that. And when I found out I was having twins, I was ecstatic. And she goes, "You're happy about this?" I said, "Oh yeah. Why don't you tell me before, huh? You wanted twins." I said, "This is great. We get 2 kids." So anyhow, I'll never forget the day I took her to the hospital, and there was fetal distress, and we knew ahead of time. And she knew that she was going to go into that hospital room and probably have a C-section. She'd never had anything like that before, and she was fearless. I dropped her off, because I went to drop her off in front of the hospital, and I went to park the car. And I remember her getting out with such determination. And I was looking at and saying, who is this woman? Who is this woman? There's no fear in this woman. No fear at all. I was amazed. So she's always been my hero. And she's always been the strong one. When she was sick, and we brought her back home from the hospital back on February 6th, Michael had found some pictures of her, and he found a journal. And he says, hey, Dad, while you're sitting here, why don't you go through this journal and look at these pictures? I said, well, I'll get to it. I was very interested in the journal. So I went through it. And that journal taught me a lot. It was from 1986, and I had never seen it before. And she only had about 45 entries in it. But the entry she put in was powerful because it told you what was important in her life. It was all relationship. It was all family. It wasn't, I want a bigger house. It wasn't, I want a nicer car. It was, this is what the kids did today. This is what they did today, and this is how I enjoyed it. But there was one entry in there that broke me. And when I read it, I cried, and I just cried, and I just cried. Because it was February 27th, 1986, and this is what the entry said. Paul came home at 4:30 a.m. from a reset. A reset is where you go into a grocery store and you tear it apart. And then you confuse the shoppers because they come in the next day, they don't know where their stuff is. And you rearrange it, you put it all over the place. So I was at this reset for Ralph's Supermarkets in Southern California, and I came home at 4:30 a.m. in the morning. And the next thing that she said, it just wrecked me. This is what it was. We spent a few moments caressing each other. That's what was important to her. I came home at 4:30 in the morning, and we spent a few minutes caressing each other. That was the heart of my wife. That's the heart of the wives that should be in this room, guys. So let them know your love. Let them know your love. I was married to this woman for 36 years. I'm going to tell you, they were 36 perfect years. Did we ever fight? Yep. Did we ever have arguments? Sure. Did it ever divide us? Nope. All the complications and troubles we had in our lives always brought us closer together. It never divided us. It never divided us. The Lord was calling me out of the corporate world 3 years before I left. I did not go willingly. All right? I was making a lot of money, and I left the corporate world in 1994. I was making a lot of money, and I battled with God. I said, God, you don't understand, God. I've got 3 young kids. I've got a wife that doesn't work. I've got a house. I've got all these obligations. I can't start a business. I need my job. God had other plans. 3 years later, he pulled that job out from under me. And I remember I was praying with Mary. And I said, Mary, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm hanging on by my fingernails. I'm just hanging on by my fingernails because the value of a man is how he provides for his family. And if I couldn't provide for her and the kids, I didn't have any value. So what kind of a man was I going to be? I said, babe, I'm just hanging on by my fingernails. And the advice she gave me shook me. Let go. Let go. Let God handle this. That was the type of woman she was. She always knew God would take care of the situations. Always. And she always relied on him. And she always would get me back on course. Always. So, we had to sell our house. We had to rent property. We had to do all these things. I had a lot of friends that basically didn't want to hang around us anymore because they were fearful. Paul might ask me for some money, you know? Maybe I don't want to hang around this guy anymore, which I never did. I've never been one to do any of that. But I knew who my friends were after that, which was a good thing. And we moved from a huge home that we had in New Hampshire to a small 2-bedroom townhouse. And we gave the kids the master bedroom, and her and I took the small room. And I'll tell you what, we had the greatest time in the world. They shoveled our snow for us, they cleaned the pool for us, and they mowed the lawn. And I'm sitting there going, maybe I should have left the corporate world 3 years ago, like God said. But it was awesome. So then we started our business. And Mary worked fervently around the clock on the business. And I'm going to be honest with you, right now, the business is exploding. It's really doing well. And everyone goes, well, you should really be happy. And I'm happy, but I'm mixed with it, because that was going to be the fruits that she was going to receive. You see, all of my dreams and all of my visions include Mary. So I don't have any visions and dreams now. I don't have any, because they all included her. I'm what they call dry toast. She's what they call exciting. If it was up to me, I get up, I go to work. I come home, I work out, I go to bed, I get up, I go to work. I say, Mary, what are we doing today? She says, oh, we're going to go here tonight. And tomorrow night, we're going to go to a movie. Oh, okay. If not, I go to work. I come home, I work out, I go to bed. That's what I do. She was the exciting one. She was the one full of life. She was the one that I relied on. So now, I've got this vacancy. One of the greatest things that we ever did together was start the Holy Spirit Party. And I'll tell you how it started. The Azusa Street 100th anniversary was held in Southern California. And I had to stay home for it because I had to work, but Mary went with the kids. And things happened there, but they just didn't happen there. When they came home, things continued to happen and continued to happen. And we saw miracles happen. And we saw things happening. And we said, God is doing something here. We have to do something with this. So we started the Holy Spirit parties. And things changed, and the Spirit changed. And things were just increased. And our house became a house that had an open heaven. And it was just amazing what the Lord was doing. And it was the kids and it was Mary. Me, I would go to bed at times at midnight. But Mary would stay up till 3 or 4 o'clock until everyone was ministered to. Because that's who she was. And I relied on her for that. She was the intercessor. I was the guy that made the money. That was it. So we did the Holy Spirit Party for over 12 years. And over 12 years, so many people got blessed. I still get people calling me. A lady last week called, and she's only been there once. And she said, Mary made such a change in my life. I'm still listening to the prophecies that she said over me. And they're still coming true. And she said, she ministered so much that one time I came. But that was the wife that I loved. That was the wife that I was privileged to be married to for 36 years. We celebrated our 25th wedding anniversary 11 years ago. And I surprised her by taking her back to where we went on our honeymoon. But I didn't tell her that. I was driving by the place. I said, hey, isn't that where we went on honeymoon? She said, oh my gosh, I think it is, Paul. Let's look back and let's check it out. I look back in there. I go, oh my gosh, did this used to be called such and such? Yeah, it was. Well, that's great. Check me in. She went, and it had been so long since we had been there that they had changed ownership, and they didn't know which unit we were in. They had no idea. But God knew. Put us in the exact same unit 25 years later. The exact same unit. And we partied like it was 1999. We really did. We had a phenomenal time. Phenomenal time. And then we went out to Four Corners, and we did some other touristy things. And she paid me the biggest compliment she ever gave to me was on that trip, because it was when the Holy Spirit Party was still in its infancy, and nobody separated her from the Holy Spirit Party at that time. Nobody. So I was planning to get her home at around 4:30 on Saturday. And that Friday night she said, Paul, I don't want to go home yet. I said, what do you mean? I'm having too much fun with you. I don't want to leave. I want to spend another day out. So we went to a place you can't get to from here. It's called the North Rim of the Grand Canyon. It's like impossible to get to. But we went there, and we had a ball. And in the slideshow, you'll see some of those pictures from the North Rim. But we just enjoyed it so much. But that was my wife. I don't want to go home yet. I want to spend more time with you. We felt that we had some amazing thing happen last year regarding her cancer. It's something called CAR-T. And a lot of people may not know this, but it's gene therapy. It's new technology for healing cancer. So it just so happened that we became, or Mary became, the first person in the US to have CAR-T therapy after it was approved by the FDA. And WGR in Chicago did an expose on it where they interviewed her and everything else, and she was quite the celebrity at the hospital. People wanted to come in and get her signature, and it was really a big thing. And we thought that was the answer, because it was something that our oncologist at the time said, we're not talking about remission here, we're talking about a cure. So we were really excited and expecting great things. But it didn't happen. It didn't happen. And that was heartbreaking. But cancer robbed us of a lot of things. It robbed us in the last 3.5, 4 years of traveling together. The only time we would travel was basically when we go to clinics around the country to try to find more answers. It robbed things like this. I couldn't sit down on a Friday night and enjoy a glass of wine with my wife. Or I couldn't hold her in bed and hug her because the tumors would get in the way. So it robbed a lot from us, even before it took her life. And it was a terrible, terrible thing. So when the CAR-T failed, I wasn't very happy about that. So I got on my hands and knees and I prayed to God. And I said, God, how could this have happened? This was supposed to be the answer. What's going on here? And this is what God said back to me. I find no guile in Mary. Now, oh, that's an interesting word. No guile. Let me check that out. Whoa, that's amazing. No guilt. Nothing. She was perfect in his eyes. And you know what? I told her that. And every time I tell her that, God finds no guile in you, Mary. She was innocent. She shouldn't have died. I'm not sure what happened, but I'm still trying to sort through all of that. But she had no guile in her life. Home was wherever Mary was. When we spent 6 weeks in Chicago, I was home. When she was up at Mayo and every night I'd be sleeping on the recliner in her hospital room, I was home. Now I'm in a house. I'm not home. Because she's not there. I see pictures of her. I see the decorations she's done. But she's not there. I don't even feel her spirit there. So that's something I'm going to have to deal with. One thing I can tell you is, even in their last days, she was a giver. I transformed from being a husband to being a husband/servant. And for about a month, I stayed out of the office so that I could be with her. Because she was so weak after she had a staph infection in her back, she couldn't even walk. So I would go, and I had an office chair on wheels. And I'd put her on that office chair and wheel her around the house. And if she had to go to the restroom, I'd pull her into the restroom. I'd pick her up, I'd put her on the commode, pull her pants out, put her on the commode. I'd have to wipe her sometimes and wash her hands and everything else. And I wouldn't sell that time for anything. I was so happy to be a servant to her because she was worth it. She was worth it. But I had to go into the office one day, and I went in for about 3.5 hours. and I had to pay some taxes and pay some bills. So Rochelle came to help out during that time. And I went to the office and I took care of some of the business. And on the way home, I was going to stop off at a medical supply store because I wanted to get a mask for her. Because the night before I noticed that she had oxygen that was going into her nose with the nose drip that they had. But she was breathing through her mouth, and I'm going, that oxygen isn't really helping her. Let me see if I can get a mask. So I was coming down the 60, and I pull off on Greenfield, and she calls while I'm at the bottom of the ramp, and she says, Paul, where are you? I said, well, I'm on my way home, but I was going to go to the medical supply store. She goes, don't, come home now. I said, what's up? She said, I have to go to the bathroom. I said, oh, okay. Mary could hold things a long time. Matter of fact, at the hospital, they would be amazed. She could urinate over a liter of liquids. And they'd never seen that before. They put a little bedpan on her. I'd say, that's not enough. Oh, no, that's not enough. So she was amazing that way. So she said, no, Paul, I have to go. And I said, okay. So I got right back on the entrance ramp and I started hauling off on the 60 to go home. And I'm up at 80 miles an hour and I'm in the carpool lane because it's the time you can do it. It wasn't 3 o'clock yet. And all of a sudden my alarms start going off on the car. And I look and it's got all 4 tires of the car and it's telling me the pressure in each tire. And I'm going, oh, okay, tomorrow I'm going to have to stop by Tire Center and have them take care of it. But the front passenger tire is at, everything else is at 39, it's at 32. And I'm going, okay, it's 7 pounds under. No, it's at 26. I'm going, oh shoot, it's at 20. I'm going, whoa, I'm going 80 miles an hour and I'm going to have a blowout on the 60. So fortunately I pulled over and I got off on Superstition Drive and I went behind the mall because I remember there used to be a Sears Tire Center there that's closed. So I'm going, oh shoot, that's not there. So I drove down a little further and there was an Earnhardt Tire Center, fortunately. So I pulled in there, it had 2 pounds left on it. And I said to the people in the tire center, I said, I need to have you fix this tire and everything else. He said, well, all right, let's see what we can do. So I called Mary. I said, Mary, I'm so sorry, I just had a blowout on the highway. I can't get home. Can you have somebody take care of that for you? She says, oh yeah, Amber took me, I'm okay. I said, all right, fantastic. And then the next thing she said just broke me. This was less than 2 weeks from her death. She said, Paul, did you have lunch? And I said, who is this woman? There she is, she's so weak. She's so weak. And she's worried if I had lunch. And I'm sitting there going, oh my gosh. This is the most amazing woman I had ever met. But that was the essence of my wife. She was caring about me at that time. Now the next story I'm going to tell you is going to be worse, so hang on for it. Some of you may have read about it already. On February 6th, it was Monday night / Tuesday morning. Monday night, we're sitting together in the hospital room at Mayo. Our legs are dangling off the side of the bed because she liked doing that position every once in a while because it would get her in a different position than just laying in bed. And the nurse came in at 10:45 and said, at 11:15 I'm going to come in, I'm going to give you your meds. And we said, oh, okay. So we knew we had half an hour. So I was sitting there, I was trying to hug her even though she had the tumors and all. And all of a sudden, the nurse walks out, and within a couple of minutes, her heart rate goes up to 163, and her respiration rate and oxygen levels drop dramatically. So there was major problems. So I ran out of the room. I got the nurse to come back in. Within 5 minutes, the room is full of medical people, and they're trying to figure out what they're going to do to save her life. And they're telling me, Mr. Zayas, if this doesn't get fixed, you won't make it through the night. This is her last hurrah. If we can't do something here, it's over. So I'm standing by her bedside,
and I'm rubbing her arm, and I'm rubbing her arm, and I'm really close to her, and I'm saying, hon, everything's fine. Just relax. Everything's fine. It's going to be okay. Just relax. And during the midst of that turmoil, she looked at me, and she couldn't talk by this time, by the way. She had lost her voice. She couldn't talk at all. And I'll tell you why that was a blessing in a minute. She couldn't talk, but she looked right into my eyes, and this is what she did. She goes, I love you. And then she leans forward and kisses me twice on my lips. The last time she ever kissed me. After that, I kissed her probably 500 to 1,000 times because I kept kissing her and kissing her. But that was the last time she was able to kiss me. Even close to death, she was still giving. That's the wife I married. That's the wife I was blessed with for 36 plus years. That's the wife I wanted to be with for the next 36 years. And it just didn't work out that way. But if you take a look at this picture over here, I'll show you something interesting. This picture was taken in Rome. And it's on a bus. You really can't tell because it's such a close-up. It's on a bus. And the picture was taken by my daughter Amber. And I'm looking at the picture with Amber and I'm saying, oh, I love it. Because this was like a year and a half before she came down with cancer. And it just shows the essence of her so well. The liveliness of the eyes. That I could get lost in these eyes for hours. The smile. Just their persona. And Amber says to me, Dad, you're in that picture too. And I said, what? So I started looking and I'm thinking there's a reflection somewhere. And that there's somewhere that I'm in here. Maybe it's in her eyes and I'm looking. And Amber goes, no, Dad. You're down at the bottom right-hand corner. I said, what? It's hard to tell because this thing's wrapped. But the bottom right-hand corner here is a little white strip. That was my jacket. I was sitting right next to her. I am in that picture. The irony is this picture now represents my life. There's only about 2 or 3% of me left, and 97% of it is gone. And I've just got to figure out with the Lord and with my family how I'm going to get through this. But the great thing is, God has given me the ability to get through this because of the legacy that Mary left. The legacy Mary left is 3 kids that are blessed beyond measure and 3 in-love kids that are blessed beyond measure that I have the opportunity to know and to love because of what my wife poured into them. I have 7 grandchildren that are so amazing because of what this woman did in her prayer life and her sacrifice for those kids. When we got married, I told her, I said, you got to understand, one thing is, when we have kids, you stay home. And we were living in Southern California. She said, okay. Now, Mary originally wanted to be an executive, and she was not going to be a baby factory. And then she told me that once. And I said, okay, all right, fine. Until she met my nephew from one of my brothers, and she fell in love with him. And after that, she said, Paul, I want to have kids with you, and I want to have them as soon as possible. And sure enough, we conceived on our first anniversary, and she knew when she conceived. We conceived once in Las Vegas, and we conceived once on the Queen Mary. And she knew. She knew she was pregnant. I mean, it was amazing. She knew, both times. And I think we were at the Queen Mary first, and then we were in Vegas. Amber has a strong love for England. She said that earlier. Michael has always been the gambler of the group. Always. God has a sense of humor. He really does. You can always tell people that have a good marriage on how they talk about marriage. And they'll be the ones that are the matchmakers. And you'll see them every once in a while. Mary and I were one of those couples. We could not stand seeing somebody not with somebody. So we matched up so many people in our 36 years. And most of them made it. Some didn't, but most did. But the reason I say that is, we were matchmakers because we loved each other so much. That's why we were matchmakers. Because we wanted everyone to have that type of relationship we had. And because of that, we could actually very comfortably say, yeah, you should meet this guy. You should go ahead and you know, go out with him. And it's a great thing. That's what you want to do. And to this day, you know, how can I say, I still match people up, and I guess I still will. But anyhow, I just want to tell you in closing that I've got a great loss here. But I've got a great support system, and Mary's legacy lives beyond her. And I always thought it was nice that I was in good shape, but I'm now thinking maybe it's not a good thing, because I really don't know how long I do want to live now. You know, I could probably live 35 years, 40 years. I'm stronger now than when I was in my 30s. But yet, I don't have that desire. My dreams aren't there. And I know I just got to get through this, but it's rough. But everyone here is helping me. And all of your love and prayers are helping as well. But this is a big thing to overcome. And I'll tell you what, I know I once heard somebody say it's better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. I am amazed at the love story I had. And I am amazed at the woman that the Lord blessed me with. And many times over the years, when Satan would try to tempt me and say, you should get out of this marriage, this and that, I'd say, you don't know how hard I worked for this. See, men love things that they work for. So, girls, you're not married, make the guy work for you. Seriously. Men don't appreciate things that they're given for free. Look at a kid that graduates from high school, give him a brand new car, he'll beat the snot out of it. But if he works and he buys a used car and graduates from high school, he'll nurture and take care of that car until he sells it for a better one. Men need to work for stuff. They don't make it easy for them. This woman made it hard for me. God made it hard for me. But that was a blessing. That was never a curse. And in closing, there was one other thing I did want to add. And it was, before I got married to Mary, I knew I had to do God's will and not mine. So the hardest prayer I've had to pray in my life prior to praying for Mary to get healed and all was a prayer that I had with the Lord before we got married. And I came before the Lord and I said, God, I love Mary so much. I love her so much that if I'm not the best for her, you give her someone better. Because that's how much I love her. And I meant that. And I was crying when I was praying that. I wanted to pray and I wanted to say, God, you give her to me, I deserve her. But you know what? I knew I couldn't do that. I knew it had to be God's will and not mine. If I would have forced it on God, he would have relented and I could have had Mary. But I wouldn't have what you see here. I don't even know if the marriage would have lasted more than 5 or 6 years because it would have been my will. But when God builds the house, it stands. And God built this house. And it has stood the test of time. And there's living proof throughout this room and right here in the front rows. So thank you all very much for coming out. I know we're going to have refreshments and a few more things happening. And thanks for listening.